Welcome to You Are Medicine. My name is Thuy, and in this episode, we are talking about the healing powers of sweating. Steam therapy and sweating are ancient healing practices worldwide. In the Americas, sweat lodges are performed for spiritual healing and purification. In Asia, steam herbal saunas provide relief from illness. In Africa, vapor baths are also indicated for disease as well as to energetically cleanse and protect. And Europe also has its own tradition of saunas and sweat lodges for ceremonial and therapeutic healing. All of these practices include steam, an enclosed space, and plant medicine. In Vietnam, where my ancestors come from, steam therapy, or Xong is a very easy and practical folk remedy that is common knowledge. I remember my parents and relatives referring to it and doing it at home when I was a small child, but over time it was replaced by Western medicine, cough syrup, and Tylenol, as we became adapted to American ways of living. When I visited Vietnam for the first time at the age of 19, I became sick with fever, and my grandma boiled up a large pot of herbs she picked from the yard, had me sit on the floor, and covered both me and the pot up with a large blanket and made me sit in the hot steam. At 19, my young mind was already conditioned to think of folk remedies like that as unscientific old wives' tales practiced by uneducated people. But in that moment in Vietnam, I was too sick, vulnerable, and desperate to resist, and I didn't want to be rude to my grandma, who had picked those herbs and prepared the steam for me. I remember being scared of the heat, my grandma encouraging me to breathe in the herbal medicine and sweating profusely. After that steam therapy, there was immediate relief and a lightening of my body, and I recovered. I was able to enjoy the rest of my stay in Vietnam with good health and energy. Perhaps there was a seed of something planted in me at that moment, because some years after that, I decided to start my studies in traditional Chinese medicine and learned about healing from a more traditional approach. And it was many years after completing my studies in TCM that I had the good fortune to attend a Native American sweat lodge ceremony that had a profound, deep healing impact on me. After that sweat lodge, I began doing Vietnamese sauna therapy on my own at home and started to experience it on a deeper level than I remembered. The wonderful thing about Vietnamese sauna is that it is so easy and convenient to do at home. Even you can do it by simply boiling a pot of water with herbs and creating a mini sauna by covering yourself and the pot up with a large blanket. We'll have a link for more detailed instructions at the end of the podcast, so stay tuned. In the meantime, we will hear from 5 patients who agreed to do this folk sauna at home and report on their experiences. Their reports ranged from physical relief to emotional release to psychological insights and even to a sense of spiritual wholeness. The first patient that agreed to this experiment is Miriam, a busy young mom juggling work, school, and parenting. I've been working with Miriam for a few months on anxiety in many forms and together uncovering the deep roots of daily stress. When I asked her to be part of this experiment, she readily agreed. So when you went, how was the preparation with everything like the steaming, making a tent and everything,
I loved the preparation. I loved the ritual of it. There's something about just the preparation in itself that seemed so sacred. Like, I don't know, it was an amazing experience. It was so cool. Like, I can't believe how much sweat came out of my body doing it like this. And maybe it could be, maybe even making like a cup of tea could be more sacred if I like went into it with as much intention as I went into this. Because I spent also like the whole morning, like I knew that I was going to sit down and do this. So it's like I made a conscious effort to like create space, not just a physical space in my room, because I knew that I was going to put the towel down. I have dogs, I have cats. So it's like, let me vacuum, let me clean, let me smudge my room, like let me sit down and meditate and just like create the space physically as well as like emotionally and mentally to allow whatever experience this is going to be enter into like my mind and my heart. And so I don't know, it was like the whole morning, even before the actual like putting the herbs and letting them simmer was like preparation.
Listening to Miriam talk about preparing for this sauna, I liked how much intention she had going into it. To make things easy for my participants, I gave them each a small bouquet of herbs picked from the clinic garden, gave simple directions to simmer the herbs in a covered pot for 15 minutes, and to create a tent for themselves and the pot for a mini sauna. I gave a general overview of what Vietnamese sauna can typically do, but also told them that medicine works with our own intention and healing capacity. I liked how Miriam went in with strong intention and that she noticed that the medicine was happening even before the actual preparation of the herbs. It is a common experience that once someone agrees to healing ceremony, the healing begins at the moment of agreement, and all things leading up to the ceremony is part of the healing journey. I asked Miriam to talk more about what she was thinking about going into the sauna.
I mean, I didn't really know what to expect at all in doing this. And so I guess the intention was really just to be open to whatever the experience was going to be, which when I arrived to the actual experience itself was eye-opening because while I say I didn't know what to expect, I feel like I still in some way have some form of expectation, if
Uh-huh.
that makes sense.
Yeah. What did you realize?
Well, I don't know. It's like I always expect to have this like come to Jesus moment. Like the waters are going to part, and, like the bushes will burn, and it's just so much more subtle than that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And it's funny because when I was doing it, so as you know, like I'm in school, and when I'm in class, I'm so focused on the answers because I have this assignment coming or I have this test coming. So I'm just like analyzing every single second, you know, and I'm listening, I'm hanging on every single word and I'm trying to write everything down in class. So when it comes to the test, I do really, really well. And so I was thinking about this, you asking me questions during the process. So, and it was almost like the same experience where it was like, I'm so focused on, okay, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Because I have to report back, you know, that it was like,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
because it feels like when I'm in school, like I miss out on the actual experience of school. Like I'm actually missing out on what's happening in class because I'm so focused on this thing that's going to happen later that I'm not being present.
Yeah.
But it was different because because it happens in school like after the fact. Like the semester's over and it's like, what the hell did I just learn? Like, what just happened? Like, I don't even know. But it was like, oh, I'm consciously aware today of this is happening right now as it's happening. I'm like, oh, wait a second. I'm focusing so much on like gathering information to be ready for that I'm kind of missing out on this. And I had this thought of I'm missing out on the experience while I'm like sitting quietly for an hour. And let me tell you, that was hard. It was really, really hard.
Uh-huh.
I have not sat by myself without some distraction, like the TV on, or let me grab my phone, or for that long. So that was cool.
To be clear, the hour that Miriam sat was after she came out of the sauna, not in the sauna. I asked everyone to sit for up to 15 minutes in the sauna and rest for about an hour afterwards before I interviewed them. It was interesting and not too surprising to me, Miriam's experience in the sauna. She's related to me before anxiety keeping her from being in the present moment, and that is part of what we work on when she comes into acupuncture. And although she is reporting that same experience in the sauna, the clarity and humor she had about what was going through her mind was refreshing and allows for a real shift. And that allowed for the insights that she reflected on after the experience.
But when I was sitting, it was just like, maybe that was the experience. Maybe to be consciously aware of like, this is happening, this is where my mind's going, able to observe the way that I am like reacting or what's coming up for me. Like that was the experience. but I just had this expectation of what it's supposed to be. And I just have to let that go. And whatever's happening, whatever happened, that is exactly what was supposed to happen. And I don't know. It was really cool.
Confronting habitual mental and emotional patterns while in the sauna was an experience that all participants had to one degree or another. Camille was another volunteer I had for the sauna that had a similar run-in with her own thought patterns.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, yeah, I've noticed that I've been kind of thinking about a lot of things. Like, my mind will go really fast, but because I'm the kind of person who has anxiety, maybe like general anxiety, but even more intensely have felt social anxiety, and I even have something called pure OCD, which is like obsessive compulsive disorder or intrusive thoughts without like, the physical symptoms, or kind of like the more commonly known symptoms like hand washing or checking things. Like, that kind of thinking is different versus the kind of thinking I have, where I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm curious to kind of follow where those thoughts go, versus when I'm feeling very anxious or having a lot of intrusive thoughts, it just feels like I can't get out of it. Or yeah, like those thoughts are, yeah, I don't even know really how to describe it, but yeah, it's a different state of mind. So I was thinking about a lot of different things because there's so many ideas I wanted to explore, but I haven't meditated for a long time for a couple of reasons. So being in that the sauna and stuff was making me think of that. I was like, oh yeah, this is familiar. This is where I'm kind of like thinking of different thoughts and stuff, or even just kind of seeing where my thoughts go. And I guess like I didn't want to kind of like force a theme or anything, or force a thought. So I was just like, okay, let me see kind of like what comes up. How can you accept things that come along, which is like something that comes up in Buddhism.
Totally. Did you find yourself, because it sounds like you were in your thoughts a lot. Were you able to get more in touch with your body in the sauna? Because it's a very physical type thing with the sweating and everything. Tell me about that.
Right. Yeah. So like I was following the directions, and I kind of like lifting up the lid a little bit to make sure the steam wasn't coming out too much. And then I think maybe this is like obviously that other people were this, but for me, I was like, okay, maybe like instead of lifting the pot towards me, I should just kind of lift the lid away from me, so that way like the steam isn't like hitting my hand so much. So then that's when the heat increased, and then I was sweating a bit more. And then I felt like I was kind of like, I don't know, maybe getting into my body a little bit more then. And then I think it's, literally like turning up the heat on yourself. So that's kind of what was happening for me a little bit. I think I remember feeling like a little bit of kind of like pressure on myself, but kind of like in a good way. It's kind of like, oh, okay, I might be sweating out something, or like this like heat is bringing up like something for me that needs to come out.
I liked how Camille put it, literally turning the heat up on yourself. That is actually what we are doing in the sauna, with the end goal being healing. I was impressed with how both Camille and Miriam dealt with their intrusive thoughts during the sauna, acknowledging them, understanding them as part of an ongoing pattern that they'd like to shift, and using the experience, even though it was uncomfortable, as an experience to nudge them towards clarity, allowing them to learn and heal from it. I can imagine too many times when we can't control our intrusive thoughts, get frustrated, and then get down on ourselves for having, quote unquote, failed at the healing opportunity presented. But in both cases, Camille and Miriam changed the pattern of thinking into a positive and healing experience. Another patient, Dakota, came into the sauna from a less cognitive space and a more emotional one. She had received recent distressing news about her mother and shared with me the state she was in when she did the sauna.
So it was like kind of difficult timing because my mom was like diagnosed with metastatic cancer yesterday. I was having a lot of intense feelings going into the day and the steam. So I was feeling a lot of just like grief and fear, and just sat with that while I was steaming. And I had therapy earlier today too, which kind of got all of the cognitive parts out. So I was more like available to just be in my body and just sort of like be with the feelings. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was intense. So that's kind of what I was thinking about, but not like overly thinking about it, just sort of feeling what that feels like, that's the reality now.
Yeah.
It was interesting. In the beginning, I was like really like kind of restless and trying to like position myself appropriately and moving a lot. But I think I sat with the steam for like 30 minutes. And yeah, it was great. I was like, this is awesome. And I just like settled down, like calmed down and just sort of started to get kind of sleepy. And I'm still there. I'm like still really, really sleepy, but I'm feeling a lot lighter and just a lot more in my body. And I was feeling kind of like well, we are animals, but I was feeling my animal body a lot during the steam. I think because the sweat, it's just very visceral. And there's something really beautiful about that. I felt like I was like physically moving things. So yeah, it was great.
I enjoyed how visceral and physical Dakota's experience of the sauna was, and how the sauna can benefit physical imbalances and more.
Yeah, they're different, and I can share this with you. There's different plant recipes for different things. It's definitely amazing when you have a cold and you need a decongestant. It's amazing when you have a sore body. So this came out with folk medicine. A lot of people who are manually working a lot, farmers, they have tight muscles and stuff. So there are herbs that you can use for that at the end of a long work day. And there's these herbs that are de-stressing and spiritual connection, of course. So there's all kinds of different types of recipes you can play with and to affect different things.
I guess like a total shift in consciousness. I was like, wow, that was like a casual thing I just did. And I like walked through this threshold with myself. And like, what a way to honor just like each day, you know, with these types of practices and just like slow down. Cause that's really what it helped me do. I just like slowed down and I got more attuned to what was going on for me and was able to just move some stuff, just really simple, and then just give myself some space to rest. And it's like very simple. And I would like to do those things more, but I don't even think about that. And I haven't had anybody just be like, hey, here's this thing. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's a thing. I'm going to do that. That sounds great. Why not? You know? Yeah, I definitely want to start incorporating it into my weekly just sort of practice that I have and experiment with plants and yeah, not do the thing where it's like, okay, now it's a serious thing and I got to get all the stuff. And, you know, because I have like the perfect things that I just found easily today through my house. So
Nice.
I'm really grateful that you invited me.
The only thing is, I would say that there is a precaution, like don't do it when you're like super, super tired because it will drain you more. So if you're exhausted or haven't slept for like 5 days, don't do a sweat. And if you're ever feeling yourself overheated already, like a lot of times if you have a fever or women who are going through night sweats and all that. So those are the only two things to worry about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
While steam sauna is generally something that is safe and effective, like all things medicinal, it should also be approached with some care and discernment. Since it is a very heating and in some ways rigorous therapy, those already with a lot of heat in their systems or weak should do this cautiously, if at all. It was not surprising to me that my patient Jen had the most challenging time with the sauna. She does have some internal heat, but not to the degree that the sauna would be contraindicated. This is her experience.
Did you have an intention going in or you were open?
So my intention was really to think about my stomach and always to take care of myself. That's my favorite activity to always think about. I think I talked to you a lot about that. So while I was in the sauna, I was just like, all right, belly, like you're just going to take care of yourself, kidneys, liver, whatever's upset. We're just neutralizing our body right now. This is a great space to do it. So just spending some time talking to myself about it as well.
Uh-huh. And how did the steam feel after you opened it from the back and everything was going? Was it nice and warm or too hot, or how was the heat? Did you feel like it was a long time? How was all that?
I made it about 11 minutes. I didn't quite make it to the 15. I tried. I was like, oh my God, I'm hot. I'm dying. I really liked when I shared with you, when I get sick, I often sweat. And The sweating when I'm sick is from like the inside out. And from sauna, it's like the outside in. Like you can feel the heat and it penetrates you that way. So it's just a different feeling.
Yeah, yeah. So did the covers feel like too much? What was uncomfortable?
I don't like to be that close and something touching me. So just having a cover touch me and being there with the pot right in my face, too much. I'm like claustrophobic.
Ah, so too intense for you.
Mhm.
Okay, okay. How did you feel coming out? What was the feeling?
Yeah, it was really nice. It was a nice moment. It was a time to reflect, a time to take for myself. Often I think about that in exercising, but I think that doing a sauna is another way to really take care of yourself. So it's a nice way to be intentional.
Uh-huh. And then is this something that feels easy to you or not? And would you want to do it again?
It was a lot easier than my thought process. I think if I did it again, I would probably maybe do a couple of hot pots and put it in the bathroom and just have a little more space. The bathroom's not that big, and so I could just sit in the bathtub and have the curtain on the side, have a couple of pots in there, and create the steam for the sauna that way.
Did you have any expectations going in? Tell me about all that.
I didn't really have an expectation, so I really went in and was like, okay, this is what you asked me to do, so let me go in and figure it out. It definitely offered me a space to be able to reflect for myself. I think definitely getting into my body and talking to my body and my organs, I think that's really important. I think that it's sort of like the bathtub that you hope to take once a week where you're like, I can't do this every day, but if I intentionally put time apart for it, then I will make that happen.
Right. That's awesome. I think you're my only participant that feels a little claustrophobic. Is that just something that you have in general?
Oh, I'm sure. I don't like it. I don't even like people to walk too close to me. So I'm sure that's a
Okay.
lot of, yeah.
And how about heat? Do you tend to not like heat like that in general?
Not directly in my face. Um,
So you're not a person, you don't seek out saunas or anything like that. That's nice.
no, already hot as it is.
Yeah. Yeah. You were a wild card experiment because I normally wouldn't prescribe too much somebody who's already having hot flashes or heat with this. But I think it's a different type of healing with heat. I wouldn't recommend you do it often.
Thanks.
But I think it is a tool for you to have in your mind, like on a winter day, or if you're feeling like that bath, like I want to do something to get me back in my body and to refocus my intention. It's something that you can have, especially if you have plants that you're particularly connected to. It's also something that can just be very useful in terms of congestion and stuff, about like lung stuff. When you are sick, you can do it for that. But I love it because it has such a broad range of things where you can just do it for decongestion, or you can actually, people have spiritual experiences in there. It's like a sweat lodge, a little bit. So I was just kind of gauging where everybody is in that whole like spectrum of things. I was like, I can count on Jen to just give me a down to earth report about what's happening. Was it uncomfortable in terms of just posture and crouching? Like, were you like, I wish I had a chair? Or were you okay on the ground or what?
Okay, so I went and first got a little stool and was like, oh, it's great. I'll be on a stool. And then I was like, no, I'm too far from the pod. I'm too high up. This is silly. So I got this really big pillow I have. It's not a meditation pillow, but it's kind of big like that. And so I sat that on the ground.
Okay. And 11 minutes, you are pushing it. Like after 5 minutes, were you done? And you're just like, I'm just gonna white knuckle this or what?
After about 7.5 minutes, I was like, oh, that's it? Great. When I had like 5 minutes left in my 15-minute timer, I was like, I'm really hot. And yeah, this has been great.
Jen wasn't the only one that found the physical aspect of it a bit challenging. Lupe, my last participant, also felt somewhat awkward in the mini tent situation with her posture and the hot pot.
You know, it was a little harder than I thought to slowly open the pot because, like, the top doesn't slide like very easily where it can just stay in one spot. Like, it'll like flop from one side to the other, you know. It was definitely hard at first, being okay with like the steam and just being like, okay, just stay with it. You know, definitely being careful to not burn myself, but definitely just being like, just stay with it and not being like, okay, I'm uncomfortable, I'm done.
Yeah. What were you uncomfortable about? Was it the position? Was it the heat? Was it claustrophobia? Like what felt uncomfortable?
I think it was definitely the rush of heat from the pot, you know, and but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was just very sudden. And I think the more uncomfortable was the sitting because, like I said, I feel like maybe just I needed like a little stool. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I used to be able to like sit and kneel for like ever at ceremonies, and I don't think I can do that anymore. So it was like definitely like, okay, I need to be a little more comfortable, you know. The process of sweating though was really good. Like I definitely, my body started recognizing it as something good. And for me, like I started doing a lot of the same things that like I would do if I was in the sweat lodge. I started like kind of touching my body, like making sure that I could feel the heat, you know, kind of just trying to be in my body while I'm doing it. And then, you know, I noticed that I immediately kind of like bowed my head a little bit. You know, I'm like, okay, it's a little hot, bow down a little bit so that you get a little bit adjusted. And then, I don't know, it's really humbling, actually. That whole process is like, and it's one of the things that I appreciate actually about ceremony is that it's about kind of getting back to like your core essence and your basic essence. And some of that is being humbled to the basic elements of the earth, you know, just being like, okay, it's going to take care of me and, you know, be willing to trust, being trusted, basically.
After settling into the heat and discomfort, I loved what Lupe said about getting back to the basics and the elements. Lupe is the only one of my participants who has been in a ceremonial sweat lodge, so is very curious as to how this experience would be for her. Her report is very resonant to me in my own experience of the Vietnamese sauna after having experienced ceremonial sweat. Every cell in our body has memory and sense and sensations will remind us of places that we have been. We know trauma as painful memories triggered and re-triggered from painful moments in time that keep us prisoners of that time. Likewise, beautiful, healing, peaceful memories can be uncovered, reminding us of a space of peace, harmony, tranquility, and openness that we have been and that is possible. Maybe this feels inaccessible or impossible to you and your life. What if I told you that actually that place of peace and wholeness is here, where you are? That is what naturally exists, but that is overlaid with stress and anxiety. We can't and don't create it because it is already here. But what we can do is actively work at letting go of the things that are hiding it. Letting go of the stress, tension, anxiety, fear, and worry, criticism and judgments, aggression and separation. If we can let go for even an instant, then in that moment we can discover healing, harmony, and peace, and discover the sacred wholeness that underlies everything. However, letting go isn't an easy thing, otherwise we'd simply do it. We struggle with that even though we know it's better for us to let go. Something inside us is afraid to let go. We battle with ourselves and we battle with the world. Inside a sweat or a sauna, we battle with the heat, our own minds, our bodies, our discomforts, our fears, our demons, our own willingness to let go. Lupe described her process like this.
It is partially it's just the intensity. I mean, you cannot ignore it when you're in a place that's that hot and that warm. You have to focus, and that's just why the distractions, you have to kind of like push past them, because it's so easy to get distracted when you're not feeling comfortable or you're not feeling like that ease. Feels to me that's the point of some of this, is to get us to focus and to kind of bear down on like the most basic functions of ourselves, which is in that moment is just sweating out the toxins in your body. and letting the earth help you do that, and letting the herbs help do that, and letting the water help do that, and letting that process take place with you as like kind of the conduit, and just being like, okay, this is helping me and my body, and I just need to kind of like trust that in that moment. Yeah, it's a good question because I don't think I've ever thought about it too much, but yeah.
Sometimes we need conditions to make us realize that there's nothing more important than letting go. And like what Camille said, we even turn the heat on ourselves to encourage that letting go. And what happens when you push through and get to that place of surrender?
Yeah, it felt really good. Like I really love that feeling of getting out of like a really hot space, whether it be a ceremony or sweat lodge or a sauna or anything like that. I really love that feeling of coming out. I feel like reborn, like when you get out of that space, like you're just like, oh, okay. Like, all right. And it was really good. I actually ended up laying around because I was in my living room. So I laid out the comforter and, just kind of like to ease my way back in. And it was really nice. I just kind of breathed and just felt really good. I love that feeling of like renewal.
Oh, it's beautiful. I'm just loving how you're being with it. And to be reborn again feels so crazy profound, I think, to people who don't have this experience.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you're talking about, but I'm wondering if there's a way that you can try. I know it's really hard to describe, but like that feeling of wellness, what is that?
It's a great question. It's that feeling of being comfortable in every part of your body and your skin. That feeling is not one that I feel is encouraged by our society and our world and capitalism and sexism and misogyny, all these other things. They're all about us being disconnected with our bodies and not feeling comfortable in our skin to where we constantly need something to help us forget to some extent and any just kind of distraction. And so for me, that feeling of being like, like renewal and being reborn, I guess, is about just feeling like every inch of your skin and being like, this is enough, I wish that was a feeling I could have all the time. And I know that that's something that I need to work towards. And in terms of like having that, like how to embody that feeling more. But at least for that moment, I am at my most basic form right now. And that is enough.
The feeling of renewal is perhaps one of the most sacred feelings. The enoughness that Lupe is describing is an utter feeling of peace in the body, knowing you don't have to do anything more, be anything more than what you are. Who you are is enough. It is such a basic yet elusive feeling that it seems out of reach, because most of the messages that we get in modern life is the opposite of that we need X, Y, or Z to be worthy or enough. And that constant message turns out to be a mirage because we sacrifice ourselves to get whatever X, Y, or Z we think will give us that feeling of enoughness. And even when we grasp it, there's always another thing to reach for. To have that noise be silenced and to feel in the cells of our being that we are enough is a rare feeling. Yet, how is it possible that sitting under some covers and sweating produce such a feeling? What kind of magic is this? Well, maybe it's the magic that already is in the most basic elements and in us before we overlay it with our complicated mind engrossed in stress and fear and ambitions. I felt it when Lupe talked about the feeling of humility in the sauna, and I asked her to explain further.
You're right, it's hard because I feel like humility is seen as like submission in some ways, or is seen as like bowing down to something. And I think for me, what I mean with humility in this kind of space is acknowledging that there's bigger things in myself, is like acknowledging that the power of the earth and the heat provided by the earth is stronger than me, which is true. Acknowledging that the different elements are actually stronger than me and are actually bigger than me. And that to some extent, I need to respect them, and that I need to give that respect to those elements and just also let them take care of me for that moment, I guess. But definitely giving back that respect. I feel that's something that's really missing, actually. That feeling of like respect and acknowledgement that these forces are actually bigger than us, and that, we can go into climate change, we can go into all these different topics of like how that's really coming to fruition right now. I feel like for me, in those moments where, and in a space like this where it's hot, you're sweating, it's like a time to be like, I recognize I am not the most important thing in the world. And like, these forces are actually much bigger than me. And I want to recognize that. But it doesn't mean that you're not important. It doesn't mean that I'm not important. It doesn't mean that like I don't matter. It means like I do matter. And also I am a small part of this much bigger world that is driven by these forces like the heat and water and air, and you're connecting to them, but at the same time, you're also recognizing their strength,
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you, and you explained it, like what the forces you're talking about are.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about just nature forces or other forces like the plants, or what forces are you talking about?
Yeah, no, I think it's all of it. I mean, I think it's like the plants, it's the heat, the earth that gave us the plants, it's the heat that allowed me to heat up that water, it's the water that I put in there, I mean, the earth that we're sitting on, even though I'm sitting on the wood, it's the earth that I'm on, it's all those forces. Each one is contributing to making that moment happen.
I love Lupe's explanation of humility and her acknowledging with respect to the elements, fire, water, earth. Traditional Chinese medicine is based on the understanding of basic elements that make up not only the earth, but our own bodies. It is good to acknowledge these powerful forces of nature that create our bodies. We are also nature, conversing with nature. Maybe that is what is happening in a sauna or sweat. The fire is talking to the fire inside us. The water is talking to the water inside us. The earth is talking to the earth inside us. In that communication and trust, we surrender to the forces of the greater elements and to the great force behind those elements that heal. And in so doing, there is a communication that allows us to heal, that purges us of all that is unnecessary and reduces us down to the basics, which are the building blocks of life and the enoughness that we are. Talking about these things, as elemental as they are, can be foreign to the modern mind that grasps for abstract concepts, sophisticated explanations, and projects larger-than-life results that can miss the moment. I think about Miriam's admission in the beginning of the podcast when she talks about going in with expectations, even though she wasn't quite aware of it, of what she called a come-to-Jesus moment, of waters parting and burning bushes. It was interesting what she said because, in fact, the water was parting as the steam from the medicine plants rose to open her pores and enter her skin, allowing the waters from her own body to relax and release. And the bushes were burning as the medicine plants that offered themselves from the bushes I picked them from mingled with fire to extract their essences for healing. Oftentimes, things are literally happening right in front of us, right before us, and we even speak about them, yet we still feel separate. And in that acute feeling of separation, we feel frustrated and perhaps even more distant from ourselves in life. Oftentimes, people say to me, I can hear what you're saying and I can understand what you're saying, but I can't feel it. Is there something wrong with me? And at those times, I try to bring them to the place that Miriam naturally brought herself, to affirm that that feeling of frustration or discomfort or disconnect is also part of the present moment and is the medicine, is what needs to be brought forth to uncover what is beneath in that elemental place. I talk with Miriam about this.
I'm so loving your participation and report back to me. The main reason why I wanted this practice to sort of be the focus of the podcast is I'm always trying to sort of make medicine super easy and accessible. At the same time, I'm always trying to communicate how profound something so easy and accessible is, because I feel like our general understanding of medicine is that it's complicated, beyond our reach, it requires resources or all these things, and it only treats a certain thing, like a physical thing. But medicine is like the idea that you could go pick some plants from your yard or around the neighborhood, just boil a pot of water, use your blanket,
Right.
have this profound experience. I think for me, it's like, this is the knowledge that's been lost. This is folk knowledge. And it's also the medicine of coming back to what we have, being still and accessing that, you know? And it can be so simple, but it's so profound. So the act in and of itself, like you were saying, the preparation is the medicine. The realization of the disconnect is the medicine. It's like what we have already, you know? And I love just hearing your report, because I know you. I know that it's hard for you to come to present and to accept that everything is what it is and is there for you. And so to hear that is really wonderful. Also, the sauna can affect us on many levels depending on where we are with it. So at the very basic level, it's like if somebody has a cold and chest congestion, you can just be like, okay, do this thing and it's going to clear up your lungs. And you can use eucalyptus leaves or, you know, more like lemon leaves, which help the lungs, more clearing. And if a person comes in with that, they'll just leave with that. But the beautiful thing about this medicine is like, what you come into, you leave with. And so it's like it affects you where you are. And that's actually true of everything. It's kind of like you can have a relationship with anything and anyone depending on where you are, where your limitations are, where your openness is, you know? And I also wanted to introduce how profound I find this is, because it's like trying to see how far a person can take the medicine into their healing in a very, very deep and wide way. It's a relationship with yourself. It's also your relationship with me, because you're kind of trusting what I'm saying. And so you're bringing that in if you have relationships to the plants. So if you develop this as a practice, it'll soon also be your relationship with your plants. It'll be your relationship with your environment. It's kind of like you can use everything to its full potential for healing, but understanding that it's the cultivation of that relationship is really, really amazing. And I think even if it's just physical, if somebody's just like, well, I just need something to decongest me now, that it even just affects at that level is amazing medicine. You don't have to go out and, you know, buy a decongestion. You can do this. But that it can take us so far, I think, is kind of what I was curious how everybody was going to respond to all that. So it's so cool. And I encourage you to use that sort of relationship with plants too, because I think there were some plants that I gave you, and pretty much I just picked it from the front of the garden, and they're all medicine plants. How herbs came about, how tea comes about, how steam comes about is that people historically had such a profound connection with plants that they could communicate with them, and they communicate medicinal properties. And the more we develop that sort of respectful relationship with them, the more they can bring their healing to us. You're like infusing your pores with their essence. You know, it's pretty beautiful, amazing thing. So take this with you, and you can just cultivate it. And I think the hard part is just remembering it. And also, if there's any psychological blockages about difficulty in access, to just think about it as a super easy tool. Like if you only have rosemary, it's okay. If you have essential oils and you don't want to go get plants, you can just put some drops of essential oils in. If you have dried herbs, you can do that. So in your mind, make it easy and accessible so you can develop a relationship to it without, too much resistance, because I get that too. I get that we forget and we fall back into patterns where we feel that we can't access anything and nothing can help us and that sort of thing. But if you remember you have this super easy thing, I think it's such a powerful, easy, accessible medicine to have knowledge of.
Yeah, no, it's actually so funny. Before you suggested this yesterday, I had already been talking to my daughter about like, hey, like I want to go to the nursery. Like I felt this desire to like, I just want to start planting things, whether it's herbs for like medicinal use or for like garden for eating. Like there's something very satisfying and rewarding about growing your own food, right? Growing your own medicines. And then you suggested this yesterday, and it was like, all right, now I feel inspired. I have this idea of kind of like what plants that I need to get and what I want to do. And it's exciting. And for so long, when I would think medicine, right? Like I think Western, I think going to a doctor, and I think being given a pill that's going to treat this like symptom, hopefully, right? Hopefully it will, and probably cause some weird side effects, right? And that's why I came to BCA. It's like I came to BCA because I'm diagnosed with this mood disorder, and the doctor just wants to medicate me, and something just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. And I don't know. I just felt this pull to find something different, and it just felt like all of the symptoms that this doctor is diagnosing me from, there's like this disconnect from my mind and my body. There's this disconnect from my body to the earth. And I've just been kind of untethered. And I came to BCA and I started doing the acupuncture and now this. And it's just like, I don't know, like I'm feeling so different. I feel like, I don't know, it's been really great. It's like only been like a few months that I just feel like these like constant kind of shifts inside. I feel like this more coming into my body and this different awareness and this different perspective. And I don't know, it's been such a transformative experience. And I'm really looking forward to just kind of like diving more into all of these different kinds of traditional Chinese medicinal routes other than what I've been taught like my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exciting. I mean, that you have that energy and feel pulled shows us a change already, right? Like a momentum, a different orientation towards yourself and medicine, which is the most difficult change to affect, actually. It's changing a worldview or perspective that's really hard. I think most people, they're not even aware that they want to, but most people are keeping the perspective and trying to use different tools inside that perspective. But I think what you're doing is like, you're just reorienting the whole thing. And that can have really miraculous results where you just feel different. You feel more at ease in your skin.
Does it sound amazing, even unbelievable, what healing can happen with a pot, some common plants, fire, water, and a comforter? All these elements, as simple as they are important, but the most essential ingredient is your own desire for healing and your own trust in the process. As easy as it may seem, it is still you that has to gather those simple materials. You who set aside time. You who sit under these covers and in discomfort, even when at times you want to escape. You who hold the intention of healing and reverence. It is you who has to love yourself. No one else can do it. It's an ongoing journey to undo all the ways we separate from our own selves and to return to that knowing of enoughness and connection to all that is. And wherever you are in your journey, we are here to support you. If you'd like to learn how to do the simple Focusana sweat, I have a simple video instructional at bcaclinic.com/Focusana. For pre-made herb sachets for the sauna, like the ones that our participants used, you can purchase them at BCA Clinic in Berkeley. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and we'll see you next month for another healing episode on You Are Medicine.